While the two sides continue to talk and try to find an end to the Russia-Ukraine war, the bloodshed continues. Bombing continues going on each side. There were attacks by the Ukrainian side in Russia overnight of apparently 70 some odd drones that were fired. Russia continues to fire into Ukraine side. Here on the screen, you can see Kharkiv in some recent firing that was hit in some residential areas. The Ukraine side claims that this was just innocent people. The Russians claim that this was a meeting of military folks that were living and gathered inside of apartment buildings where they were trying to disguise as civilians. Who knows what the truth is, but what we do know is that the bombings continue. And everybody wants to say, hey, let's have this ceasefire. But then there's also the question that the Russians are primarily saying is we're looking to end the war. We're looking to end the bloodshed by ending the root causes and having a permanent end to the war. So you have just categorically a different objective by the two sides. But one thing that is similar, even in the ceasefire attempt that the President Trump is trying to get with Vladimir Putin about the limited ceasefire on energy infrastructure and on the Black Sea shipping lanes, those two narrow bands right there, those things are also running into some headwinds. You have, in fact, both sides claim that we're abiding by the ceasefire. It's those other guys on their side that are the bad guys, and they're the ones that are messing this up. First of all, let's take a look. Here's what Russian Sergei Lavrov said a couple of days ago about how they're just doing what they said they would do.
Andrei Romovich Belousov specifically reported on how the moratorium, agreed upon at the proposal of President Trump on March 18th of this year during a telephone conversation between the presidents of Russia and the United States, is being observed. The moratorium is not being observed. All this time, energy facilities of the Russian Federation have been subjected to attacks, perhaps with a break of 1 or 2 days. Belousov listed all the facilities that have been targeted by Ukrainian drones over the past period, including last night. I continue in the same vein. Meanwhile, the Russian army is observing the moratorium, which President Putin ordered to be strictly followed back on March 18th of this year during a telephone conversation with President Trump.
Okay, now some of this could have to do with definitions because each side seems to have its own definition of what a ceasefire is, what the conditions are, what the limitations are. And then you have the Russian side saying, look, we only said we would not fire on energy infrastructure. We didn't say we would ever pause on just the regular war. We, in fact, expressly said we would continue on, and that's what we've done. They are claiming on the Russian side that the targets they're attacking aren't energy infrastructure. There's something else. But when you look at what was actually hit, many of these targets look pretty much like energy infrastructure to me. So it's one of those he said, she said things, except for what we do know, stuff keeps blowing up. No matter whose definitions we're using, that continues happening. On the other side of the ledger, you have the same thing going on with the Ukraine side, but frankly, they don't seem to be bothered with definitions. They keep striking whatever they want to, and they don't even bother trying to deny it or even really acknowledge it. In fact, it was shortly after this whole thing with President Trump talking to Zelensky and to Trump, Zelensky actually said, yes, I will abide by that. And within a matter of days, a major energy hub was hit in Suja, which has significant ramifications going forward, even once the war is over, to getting any kind of a gas from Russia back into Europe. So that's going to be a big issue. That's a major, major strike, which at the time, the Ukraine side, like they have done many times here, merely blamed the Russians. Like you may recall when the Nord Stream pipeline was hit. Of course, initially everybody said, oh, that's the Russians. They did that to make it look bad, like the other side was really doing it. Kind of irrespective, even without knowing the facts, you go, hang on, why would Russia bomb its own pipeline that can only harm them economically once this war is over with and takes off the table any kind of a bargaining chip? They had control over the flow. All they have to do is turn it on and off as it would work to their advantage or disadvantage. They wouldn't blow the thing up to prevent them from having the opportunity. That was self-evident. Much analysis and study since that time has proven that it was certainly not the Russians that blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Similarly, with the Suja blast here, Russia had regained control of it, and they had driven the Ukraine side out of that territory. So they had no motivation or incentive whatsoever to blow up their own pipeline. They gained nothing from it, even in the claim that the Ukraine side had. It's irrational and illogical that Russia would do that, because, this whole, will the media show, or it gets public opportunities for the Russian side, makes them look better, whatever. That's nonsense. There's nothing that the Russians can do in the eyes of anyone in the West to make them look good or make the Zelensky side look bad. It's just nonsense. So virtually certain that they did not do that. That's one of the things that the Ukraine side did. But we continue going on with this same situation where the Ukraine side is going to continue, as you saw Zelensky, I think yesterday, said this.
Всі російські обіцянки закінчуються ракетами і дронами, бомбами чи артилерією. Дипломатія для них – це пусте слово. І тому потрібен тиск. Достатній тиск на Росію, щоб вони відчували наслідки кожного свого обману, кожного удару, кожного дня, коли вони забирають життя людей і затягують війну. Вже могло би бути досягнуто припинення вогню. Саме Путін це відкидає. Саме Москва не йде на припинення вогню вже з 11 березня. І це саме їм там, в Росії, потрібна війна. І очевидно, що просто розмовами чи очікуваннями Росію до миру не примусити.
Now, if there's nothing that the Russian side can say that will change anybody's view in the West, there's a lot that Zelensky can say that will influence a whole lot in the West. So he is engaging in what he's been doing for quite a long time, which is to say everything is Russia's fault. They're the only ones that are trying to stop this. And he's with this kind of self-righteous position that, hey, look, I want to end the war. I want a ceasefire. It's those darn Russians that don't want it. Putin is the one who violates it all the time, and he's trying to drag his feet, as they've said in other comments there. And listen, you have to be able to cut through the BS. You have to be able to cut through the rhetoric and see what's actually true on the ground. And the harsh truth is, no matter what anybody's personal opinion or preference is, that the Russians have the undisputed dominant position and have all the leverage in the world. Ergo, they are not going to agree to a ceasefire that's not at their advantage. They're not going to agree to something that, in fact, works to their disadvantage, which is what the Ukraine side wanted. So Zelensky's trying to put public pressure on Putin, somehow thinking that if he can make people around the world think that Zelensky is just a peace activist, and it's Putin, it's keeping the war going on, that somehow that's going to put pressure on Vladimir Putin to say, all right, tell you what, I'll go ahead and have a ceasefire that works for you and that it advantages you and disadvantages me. I mean, that's irrational to think that anyone in a position, I'm not aware of anyone in history from a position of dominant strength in global affairs, in war and peace issues between states or two sides, has said from a position of strength, sure, I'll give in to you. I don't think it's ever happened. I can't even imagine it happened. Certainly, there's not anything common. But yet, that's what Zelensky's trying to do. It won't work. All it's going to do is continue to drag out, because he's got confidence that he can continue to hold out. See, as I've been telling you a few times, this war is not going to come to an end until one side or the other, and I think by one side or the other, you know what I'm talking about, it's going to be the Ukraine side, is going to come to the conclusion that it cannot continue the war, it cannot continue fighting as it has been, and to have any kind of possible benefit, that it can't work out to their advantage, until they recognize that the only path forward is to either submission or capitulation or a negotiated settlement on terms that favor Moscow. Until that happens, the war will continue. That's actually where we are. Now, as I show you routinely, we're already in that situation now, have been since 2023, frankly. And yet they haven't made that decision. One of the reasons that they haven't is because they keep getting all this help and encouragement from the European elite. Then, and up until January 20th, it had been because of the Biden administration. You may recall many videos that I showed, even toward the end of the Biden administration, when their officials were still in power, they would say things like, we've set Ukraine up in this great position where it can stand on its own 2 feet. Secretary Blinken said that. You had Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, who said, we've got all this stuff and we've given them all their weapons and all this ammunition, to give them a fighting chance. It was all complete nonsense. It was never true. It was never true, especially in the latter stages. After 2023, if there was any thin layer of possibilities, it was expended on the battlefield. And it was destroyed in their failed offensive when they were crushed, and everything the West had done, literally like a tin can, just got crushed at the front lines and never penetrated the Russian defenses. And since that time, of course, the Russians have been on a slow, methodical offensive where they continue to grind down into dust the Ukrainian armed forces. But now you have to wonder, okay, well, now that it's past January 20th, of course, the Europeans continue to make these kinds of comments about, supporting as long as it takes, and we're going to give you billions more dollars and new defense packages, all this kind of stuff. That keeps Zelensky from coming to the conclusion and the recognition, I said, because he still thinks there's hope, because he's still encouraged. Now, it would be one thing if it was just the United States, if it was just the Europeans, but there are still those in the United States that want to feed that narrative. One of the biggest ones is General Chris Cavoli, who testified earlier this week for the Senate Armed Services Committee, which, as Gary was talking about before this show started, when he and I were discussing this, has gotten hardly any notice in the United States on our media. And that's unfortunate, because there were some really important things that he said there. Almost no one's even reporting about it, much less challenging it like we're going to do here, just because it is, again, detached from reality. This would have been really good. Not really good. This would have been really appropriate and consistent if it had been the Biden administration. Now, supposed to be that the U.S. military is supposed to be a nonpartisan, not bipartisan, but nonpartisan. It's just there to do its job, and it's supposed to be honest and forthright no matter who's in control. So it shouldn't matter whether it's the Trump administration or the Biden administration. But this would have fit perfectly in with something that the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, might have said. So here, let's look at a few of them here. This is General Cavoli, first of all, saying that, Russia's a little bit better than they were, but overall, in some areas, they're getting weaker. So, yeah, keep fighting.
As we watch the Russians, we see that their level of skill in some technical areas is very high and is evolving during the course of the war, but it's mainly isolated in specific pockets. It does not appear to be generalizable across the force, and overall, the quality of their force, especially their ground force, has been decreasing throughout the conflict. On the Ukrainian side, we see sort of the opposite. We see a military that started pretty much from an almost cold start. We had been helping them before the war, but not at the scale we began to after the war, and they've evolved and developed very, very quickly.
So just imagine now, if you want someone who's going to tell you the truth about where this war is and where it's going to be going, and you have Zelensky, who's been just relentless throughout the entire, now into the fourth year of war, constantly saying, give me more stuff. I need more weapons. I need ammo. I need NATO extension. I want some foreign troops, all the things that he's asking for all the time. And now here you have, in April of 2025, now into the fourth year of the war, who's saying, the Russians are getting worse and worse and worse. And the Ukraine side is the opposite. They're getting better and better. What that would tell you is, if that were accurate, you'd say, well, then don't have a negotiated settlement. Don't end now. Don't have anything that submits to the Russians. Keep fighting, because they're going to keep getting worse and your side's going to keep getting better. I assure you, that is exactly the message that's heard by Volodymyr Zelensky. So at the same time, you have the president, the commander-in-chief of the United States, saying, we're trying to get this deal wrapped up. We want to negotiate a settlement quickly. We want to get this off the table, and we want to reset relations with the Russians going forward. We're already looking past the war. You have the commanding general of the United States European Command saying, basically, just keep fighting, because the Russians are getting weaker. I mean, what sense would it make, if he's accurate, wait, the Russians are getting weaker and weaker and the Ukraine side's getting stronger and stronger? Well, then just keep fighting, because now then you've turned the tide. Now things are going in your direction. Now, if that were true, that might be a reasonable course of action to take. You would still, even in that scenario, have to say, all right, but what would be the cost of turning it around? That's one of the questions you could ask. And so that still might not be an obvious one, but it would sure give a lot of grist to the possibility of let's go forward. Now, one of the other things that he specifically cited in there, that again, just music to Zelensky's ears, is he's again talking about F-16s.
There are a number of F-16s in there. There are a number of pilots in there. There are more F-16s prepared to be deployed in there. There are more pilots in the training pipeline, sir. The planes are active and they fly every day. They've defeated a large number of cruise missile threats, and they've delivered an awful lot of offensive attacks as well, specifically bombing attacks in the east. None of the F-16s has been from the U.S., though. They've mainly been from northern European countries, Netherlands, Denmark.
How effective have the long-range missiles that we've allowed Ukrainians to shoot into Russia, how effective has that been?
Very.
In all areas?
Yeah, they've been extremely effective, sir. I could go into this in private session, but the United States makes some very good weaponry, and it's the ones we've donated have been very, very effective.
Okay, so here again, you have the General Cavoli saying, yes, the F-16s are coming. There's more in the pipeline. It's getting stronger. They're doing great. They're intercepting the air defense missile. They're acting as air defense systems, taking down cruise missiles, all this kind of stuff. So you see, hey, they're getting more of them. More are on the way. I showed you a headline a week or two ago. More are coming. So the pipeline's getting better. Again, trending in the positive direction for the Ukraine side. Then he was specifically asked on long-range weapons. And you saw Cavoli do something like, yeah, they're working really good. Oh, I can't touch classified. I can tell you behind the closed doors, but it's going really well. No, it's not. What does that even mean? It's effective. It's very effective. We know for a fact, because it's been even reported in the New York Times of all places, has admitted that much of our long-range missiles, the ATACMS, the HIMARS systems, which are similar guidance systems that they have been severely degraded by the Russian electronic warfare. So they have found effective ways to minimize and limit the effectiveness of those things. And even on those cases where they have hit targets, they clearly have. You've seen some of the fires from the Russian side, especially on some of the energy, petroleum sites, et cetera, within Russia and some in the Moscow area. You've seen them actually have success on targets, and it caused Russia genuine harm. Now, when you say, are they effective? You need to define that term, because effective, did a long-range missile fired by the United States land on Russian target and blow it up and hurt Russia? Yes, clearly that happened. Is it effective in terms of the war? No, unequivocally no. So when you're using a weapon system, if you say, was it effective, you have to define what that means, because, yeah, it may have hit the target that time. Maybe 10 others didn't hit the target, hardly effective, but yeah, some of them do hit the target. But whatever that number is that hit the target, does it change the course of the war? Has it caused Russia to lose effectiveness at the front line? Has it made Russia stop going on the offensive? Does it have anything to do with their manpower pool that they have? Does it do anything to their economy, to their defense industrial base? So far, the answer is no, no, and no. It hasn't had any effect on any of those things. And again, I've said this before, but it bears repeating here because it's really important to get this. When you see General Cavoli and the senators who were asking the question to try and elicit this answer to give impression that the Ukraine side is getting stronger and the Russian side is getting weaker, you have to look at these long-range missiles from the Russian side, which have gone now almost a nightly affair, whether it's a long-range drone, a Kinzel missile, or any of the other kinds of long-range fires they have, the glide bombs, etc. They have been absolutely pummeling the Ukraine side since late 2022. So well over 2 full years now, well into the third. It's been a routine situation to where you've had all their energy infrastructure, their arms depots, sometimes bridges, train situations, whether it's cabooses or the tracks themselves, to disrupt the Ukrainian opportunity to try and hit their weapons manufacturing plants, etc. Everything to damage and diminish their ability to sustain war. It's been relentless. And it also has not caused Ukraine to collapse. And that is a massive amount of fire coming from the Russian side. And the air defenses just continues to be whittled away on the Ukraine side. It's always been behind, even with as much stuff as they're getting. It's never enough. to knock everything out, or even a substantial portion, because too much gets through. On the Ukraine side, these handful of missiles that he's talking about, whether it's Storm Shadow, ATACMS, Taurus missiles, whatever else has been used in there, basically pinpricks. I mean, Russia is vastly larger, even geographically, than the Ukraine side. They have their stuff intentionally spread all throughout their country to make it very difficult, especially stuff on the other side of the Urals, which is one of the things that they did during World War II to prevent the Germans from being able to hit those targets, and it had success then. Same situation is the case today, except the Russian air defense is profoundly better than it was during the Second World War in terms of percentages knocked out. So these that have gotten through, of course, they make great video, and it makes people think good, but only because you don't know the context. So you see these images of oil fires burning in Russia, and everybody wants to clap on the Western side. But then you got to say, what does that do to the overall number? How many oil facilities do they have? How much capacity do they have? And so far, the answer has just been a pinprick, and then they get fixed, and it gets repaired afterwards. So for General Cavoli to tell you, yes, that they're effective, yes, that the Ukraine side is getting better, that doesn't square with what we see on the ground. And that what we see on the ground is the continual destruction of the Ukrainian armed forces. Because, as I say relentlessly, and we'll say again here today to reinforce how critical and central this is to the discussion, the armed forces are really about whether you're going to win or lose a war. It's about manpower. Trained manpower. Who has the most? And when you get into a war of attrition, when you have two big sides just slugging it out, and that's what we have here. You have the Russian side with North Korea and Iran helping them out, and you have the Ukraine side with the 50 nations and virtually all of NATO and many other Western European countries, all of them helping them on the other side. It gets into a war of attrition. Who has the most inputs? Very often, I've cited this from Alex Vershinin in the past from Royal United Services Institute study last year that said in a war of attrition, the side that has the most inputs is going to win. It almost doesn't even matter about great tactics or generalship or leadership. Any of those things, as much as they help you make movies and have a lot of drama, at the end of the day, what matters is who has the most manpower, who has the most trained manpower, who has the best industrial capacity, and who can sustain the war at the front in all the logistics areas. Those four things, all on the Russian side. So it's not even going to matter when he's talking pinprick things here and there that do well on social media, but have nothing to do with winning or losing a war in context, in balance between the two sides. And unfortunately, you have General Cavoli also saying stuff like, well, if what I just told you is true, if what Alex Vershinin told you is accurate in how wars work and then how this one is working, then one would come to the rational conclusion that the Ukraine side cannot win this war and it cannot avoid defeat if a negotiated settlement is coming in. That's the conclusion that should be drawn rationally by any military man. Instead, General Cavoli comes to this conclusion.
There's nothing inevitable in war. And the Ukrainians are in very strong defensive positions right now and are improving weekly their ability to generate force and to reinforce those positions. It is hard sitting here right now to envision a major Ukrainian offensive that clears everybody, out of every square inch of Ukraine. But likewise, it's very hard to envision Ukraine collapsing and losing that conflict. I do not think there's an inevitability to a Ukrainian loss.
There's nothing inevitable in war. Of course, there's things that are inevitable in war. There are always isolated situations where the balance of power that should have worked out in one way didn't. There are isolated spots in that, but even those usually have caveats. But in the vast majority of war, there is inevitability. When the United States had its coalition in 1991, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, and there was this big 500,000 member force that went in there, it was inevitable we were going to win that war. It was inevitable. There was no question about it. And we went in with a sledgehammer when maybe a little mallet might have gotten this job done to make sure. It was inevitable we were going to win that war. In 2003, it was inevitable that we were going to be able to take our tanks and roll into Baghdad because the Iraq side had nothing to stop that with. So it was inevitable there. This situation is also inevitable because of all the inputs I just showed you are overwhelmingly in the Russian favor and getting stronger, by the way. The disparity continues to grow. So whether Russia continues to slow and methodical grind and does it for another year, year and a half even, it's inevitable that they're going to finally grind Ukraine down to nothing, and they won't have anyone left to put in uniform, or there just won't be anyone left, and they'll eventually just walk into Kiev probably unopposed. Or they may do something like I've been suggesting that they may, and they may finally use some of this combat power that's out of contact now. We're talking hundreds of thousands of troops, potentially up to 300,000 in a couple of different spots altogether, where they could find the weakest spots of this brittle defense and punch through it and cause this war to come to an even more rapid end. I don't know. We've seen some evidence that they're getting ready to do that. They haven't tried it yet. But no matter which course of action they choose, the big arrow or the slow methodical grind, they're going to eventually grind them down. It is inevitable. And it is irrational and illogical, and I argue immoral, to ignore all of that balance of power and to continue to give Volodymyr Zelensky any kind of hope, because all that's going to do is to create the situation to where tens, if not hundreds of thousands of more men are going to die in another pointless effort. Just like they did in 2023, it's inevitable that this is going to end the way it's going to as well. That was inevitable too, for very practical, concrete reasons, which I illuminated before the case. Now then, here we are in the same situation, except the stakes are much higher, because now it's not just failing in an offensive, it's losing the war that's on the line here. And we'll see what the Russian side ends up doing. I know that there's a lot of pressure inside Russia to do the big arrow. I've been reading a lot of it on some of their Telegram channels and some of their media, some of their military journals, that there's a lot of angst inside the Russia why they haven't even attempted one of these big arrow movements when they have the capacity to do so, and the Ukraine side is at its weakest point of the war. We'll see if that ends up happening. But for us to have the president, the commander-in-chief, trying to find a negotiated settlement, and then you have one of the senior commanders giving help to Zelensky to come to the opposite conclusion, is really something the President Trump's administration needs to address. Now, he's about to retire. I think that during the hearing, they said this is his last time. Okay, fair enough, but that's not the guy that I want in charge one more day, because he's working at cross purposes policy-wise to what the President of the United States is. But we'll see that. We'll see what happens with that. But that, folks, is the reality. That's where we are today. Now, before we let you go today, there's a couple of other things I want to bring to your attention that we've been talking about, some stories that we've been tracking over the last week and even beyond that. There's been a couple of updates, so I want to bring you up to speed on that. One of the things is the situation with the attack on Houthis, which, of course, got all kinds of spotlight because of the issue with the signal gate and who was on the chat, what kind of war plans were being discussed, et cetera. Everybody's focusing so much on that. They haven't been focusing enough on the legality and the utility of that attack. We'll get to that in just a second here. But what the United States said was, we're going to continue going on with this. And actually, I think it was today, or maybe it was last night, President Trump on his Truth Social had this posting you can see here. The Houthis gathered for instructions on an attack. Oops, there will be no attack by these Houthis. They will never seek our ships again. And Gary, if you could blow that up, this is the video, the attack video that he showed with it. You see there's a group of people in the middle. It's some sort of an oblong oval. Don't know what they were doing there. All we have is what was claimed. But gracious, man, when you look at the aftermath of this, you'll see a pretty substantial crater. It looks like, I don't know for sure the ordnance, but it was some huge bomb. I mean, look at that bomb there. Obviously, everything is wiped out and incinerated that was inside there. The question still comes in. We're attacking into another country. There is no declaration of war. There is no congressional authorization. This is just continuing on the same kinds of things. And again, it makes a really splashy video. But how is this going to get to the situation to where the Houthis no longer do what they're doing in the Red Sea? You're not going to bomb your way out of this one. And look, when you do stuff like this, when you kill this many, I mean, if anyone thinks that, sure, the Houthis are going to lay down now that they lost all these guys in this situation here, if you think that they're going to quit, then you haven't paid any attention at all to both Islamic radical groups and specifically the Houthis, because they have proven that they are incredibly long suffering, just like the Taliban war that we discovered to our own demise and our own loss in that war. We tried for 20 years, and I saw, God only knows how many videos of this type that I saw during my time, both in 2 different combat tours inside of Afghanistan and others where I saw some of these videos. I mean, anyone watching TV saw it a lot, and it never broke their back. It never did. In fact, they kept growing. That's what's going to happen here. I will tell you with almost certainty that whatever was actually going on there, and I question this claim that they were training for some kind of military operation, because military people know that there's satellites up there. They rarely do things in the open like that, especially with such large numbers. So I'm questioning that's actually what that was. We don't have any way to know independently. We may find out later. But whatever it was, all of those people who were in that circle have family members. And I can assure you, none of them are going to say, all right, I guess we should have quit a long time ago. Let's go ahead and fold up our tents and forget about this, attacks into the Red Sea. It's going to do the opposite. It's going to recruit even more. There's going to be more people stand up and saying, we are not going to allow our family members to have died in vain. So it's going to increase their capacity and their willingness to fight. That's how it worked with the insurgency in Iraq that we quelled for a period of time, got them to a minimum stage, but only to see it go back into some contained areas away from our sight, and then grew into ISIS. And now then a lot of those ISIS have morphed into other things after we took that. You see, it's the same thing. You keep bombing, you keep killing, they grow up and they pop up somewhere else. That's just how the situation works. And if we haven't figured that out yet, then we may again find to our demise that something else happens later on as a result of these kinds of things, because all it's going to do is just increase their resistance. Now, that is also related to what's going on with the situation in Iran, because President Trump has directly connected what the Houthis are doing there to the Iranians. And so this is probably intended to be a warning to them. Now, this was also from General Wes Clark, was on News Nation. He was asked about Trump's, basically his ultimatum that he gave to the Iranians that said, either you negotiate an end to this war, or not a war, there is no war, and into your nuclear weapons program, which, according to our intelligence, they don't actually have. But that's nevertheless what he's asking them. If they don't negotiate an end to that within 2 months, I think the end of that is the end of this month, is when that time comes to an end, then there will be bombing. And so News Nation asked General Wes Clark what he thought about that.
So the idea of we're going to bomb you or else, what comes along with a threat like that?
Well, I think once you make a threat like that, you have to follow through. I'm sorry he made the threat like that, but he did make the threat like that. So already the supreme leader in Iran has said, no, we're not going to bow to your threat. We're not coming to the table to talk to you directly. No. So I would assume that the reason we have a second aircraft carrier there, we're building up forces, we're bringing A-10s into the region. Yeah, we're going to do it. But can we do it with air power alone? And what is the end state we're seeking? That's the question.
Yeah, that's one of many questions, but it's kind of a big one. And actually, we're gonna make the call to the bullpen now, and to bring in our expert Gary Villapiano. Gary,
Hardly.
I keep hearing these kinds of just glib comments like that. Like, yeah, what's the end state? But then you see, if you start with that, like, what is the end state? That should come before there's any action. But instead, he's saying, well, yeah, I wish he hadn't have made this ultimatum, but now he's got to go ahead and go through with it. So what's going to be the end state? To me, it sounds like Wes Clark is going, yeah, there's going to be bombing in there, better be, or we're going to call him out. But maybe we'll figure out what's going to be the end state before. Don't you think we should reverse that order?
Oh, Danny, it was stunning. Well, he said it, so there's nothing we can do now. We can't possibly go back on that. We can't rethink things. We can't, reevaluate. No, we've just got to go straight ahead now because, he said it. That is such rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, yes, it was a mistake for him, according to Wes Clark. It was a mistake for Trump to have made an ultimatum. But now that he said it, he's in his view, it would be more costly to say, okay, never mind, we're actually not going to do that, than to say, okay, that was a dumb idea, let's don't do it. That has gotten us into a lot of trouble in the past.
I think he's of the mindset of inevitability there, right? But in the wrong direction. The heck.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I can see those two connections there.
Right.
Yeah. This just drives me crazy when you're talking about what is the end state. I mean that is the central question. Anytime you're talking about the use of military power, that's got to be question number one. What is your end state? And then depending on what the answer is, then you got to see, do you have the resources and the capacity to make it good? And what if you don't? What are the consequences? What I used to think was the baseline understanding and questions to ask don't seem to even be asked, much less answered.
Yeah, Danny, I mean, that's what I would even ask you. Does anyone really know what the final results, but even the developing results would be? Should we go in that direction? I mean, that's the great unknown and the dangerously unknown.
And it's one thing if it's unknown, but it's an additional bad thing if, in the absence of an answer to the question, you still go ahead and do it and just like, well, let's bomb and I don't know, see what happens. Maybe it'll be good.
Oh wow, boy, that was bone chilling the way he responded like that. And what was he the former NATO commander?
Right, yeah,
Wesley Clark.
General Wes Clark, former 4-star Supreme Allied Commander. So I mean,
Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. Wow.
Yeah,
boy, for someone like of his stature to say something like that, so he was so cavalier about it almost.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of this whole neocon thing, and he's trying to. Well, I mean, I can't say he's trying to box Trump in because Trump put himself in that position, but he's certainly trying to help him stay in the box and encourage him. Yeah, that's what you should do. And, what are you going to try to accomplish? And those are the questions that should be asked. Like, okay, so you claim, now to reiterate to those who may not have known, this ultimatum that Trump gave said that if the Iranians do not get rid of their nuclear weapons program, there will be bombing. Now, first of all, Iran says they don't have a nuclear weapons program. I think that's, I don't know about the MI6, but the Mossad has, last I saw anyway, said they don't see that they have made a decision to actually start a nuclear weapons program. CIA has said that, et cetera. So they don't have a weapons program to give up. But that's actually not what Trump's asking. He's saying, I want you to get rid of the capacity to do it. So even if you want to in the future, you won't be able to. So you have to dismantle the entire energy infrastructure, nuclear energy infrastructure that they have, and to get rid of their long-range missiles that they have. And I mean, Gary, who's going to do that? What nation is going to do that?
In this climate around the world, I agree. It's so far-fetched, Danny. I agree.
So he is right in that. Wes Clark is right that Trump has put himself in a position to where either he's going to take action on what he said, or he's going to come off looking really foolish that you've made this demand that can never be met. And then if it's not met, and so far the Ayatollah has said, no, we're not going to even talk about that stuff. So right now it's not even on the table to be discussion. So Trump is going to have to come to the point to where either he does the bad thing, or I don't know, he finds some creative way to get out of it, which is what I recommend and advise with everything in me. But that is going to be hard for Trump to do, to back down from something like that.
Yeah, no kidding, Danny. I mean, kind of reminds me of the discussion we were having yesterday where the whole idea with tariffs, him threatening for, months on end, maybe even years actually, where he was threatening the tariffs, meaning that he had done it in his first time around. And then here he is, he actually implements them, as a scare tactic. So in that sense, is he using the scare tactic also here with Iran regarding, the threats of bombs? And is that his, that seems to be his, current MO as to how to secure these deals that he's looking to make around the world?
Well, that's a little bit concerning, and that leads to our next thing I want to update people on is on this tariff issue, and I hope that those connections stop right there, the similarities, because he finally did go through with this tariff situation and this tariff and everybody, to include even our closest allies, actually everybody except for Russia somehow. Everybody else, friend or foe alike, is on the tariff list here. And here is one of the first comments from the European Union leader, Ursula von der Leyen.
This is why from the outset, we have always been ready to negotiate with the United States to remove the remaining barriers to transatlantic trade. At the same time, we are prepared to respond. We are already finalizing the first package of countermeasures in response to tariffs on steel. And we're now preparing for further countermeasures to protect our interests and our businesses if negotiations fail.
So there's the European Union, who's, famous for being indecisive, now have said, look, we have these tariffs, counter tariffs ready to go on, and we've got more that's going to happen. And that's our friends. You can imagine, actually, China already launched a 34% additional tariffs on goods, which are going to all start hitting our pocketbooks very soon. So I don't know how Trump's going to get out of this one.
Yeah, I don't know either, Dan. There's people on both sides of this tariff situation. Smart people on both sides. I think we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and and I've looked at a lot of the arguments that are made on both sides, and a lot of people say, "Oh, this will bring in lots of revenue or whatever. It'll allow us to have less taxes." But there are so many different points. If you're talking about the Russia-Ukraine situation, right? You got basically four sides that you have to navigate this stuff here. There's 185 sides on this one, and the idea that all of them are going to go our way seems pretty unlikely to me.
Well, this is as he describes it. Trump describes it. This is the ultimate thing that needed to be done. For years and years and years, and we're finally taking the we, meaning the American people, are taking the hit. Willing to take the hit. He's risking it. He seems rather confident in this move, and the other people around him, Besant. And they make their arguments. Some of them make sense to me. Danny, I have to say, I have to wait and see. I can't come down on a side at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, until we see the thing play out, I guess we can not say with any confidence. Unlike with some of these military things, which I can say with a lot of confidence. But I will tell you though that my gut tells me this ain't going to end well, and we'll wait and see. The economy, the global economy, and the U.S. economy are already kind of wobbly, and just seems like it's a pretty big gamble that it's going to work out good for us. But we will take a wait and see attitude. But it's just, in my view, not a good risk to be taken. But
yeah, the other thing I want to wait and see on is how much gas did Cavoli put into Zelensky's tank, and how far is he going to run with what Cavoli's testimony was? Yeah,
that's like I was saying earlier, that's something that's a real discontinuity between the U.S. government when you have the general saying one thing and the president saying another. But yeah, we'll see. Because I'm certain that Zelensky is really happy for that fill up his gas tank, and he'll be running with it. There's no doubt about that.
No kidding. I'm surprised it's not headlines with him, arranging a meeting with him, inviting him over to Ukraine. We've got to get together, brother. We're of like mind. You understand the situation. Thankfully, somebody's on my side from the administration.
Right. Yeah. Not sure that would work out well for anyone, but sure he definitely wants to. Well, listen, I know we're running low on time here, so we'll leave it right there. But always appreciate you guys, especially on a Saturday, sticking with us here. We want to keep you updated on everything that's going on. And we'll look forward to hitting you Monday morning with another good slate of shows and some other good guests, and bring you the truth, because we are unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you whatever you need, no matter what it is, so you make sense of your world around you. Along with Gary, we thank you very much, and we'll see you next week on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.